Captain Midnight.
It's been a decade this month since the premiere of Spectacular Spider-Man on the Kids WB programming block. Before its premiere, fans, like me actually, were highly skeptical that this new show with a simple minimalist art style could ever compare to the nostalgic memories of Spider-Man the Animated Series. And then it proved pretty much everyone wrong, exceeding expectations and becoming maybe the most beloved Spider-Man cartoon ever, all in just 2 short seasons. But how did they do it? How did this Spectacular team manage to create a show that stood above decades of other Spider-Man series, both before and after it? In my opinion, by focusing on one thing, stripping the character and his world down to the essentials.
I am invincible! Get back here, Shocker!
Before I get into that, I should probably start from the beginning. Spectacular Spider-Man begins right before Peter Parker starts his junior year of high school. It doesn't bother delving too far into it, dispensing with the origin story almost entirely, but from what we can tell, he's been fighting crime as Spider-Man for most of the summer. This was a great choice and one that the movie franchise would fail to learn from a few years later. Not only did it allow us to skip over a story that we were all very familiar with, even in 2008, it allowed the show to dig into a scenario that hadn't been explored nearly as much. Peter returning to school for the first time since getting his powers, thinking that finally everything in his social life was about to be different. He asks out a cheerleader, tries to turn the tables on his old bully Flash, and it all ends up pretty bad for him, showing him that just because he's Spider-Man now, it doesn't really mean that his problems as Peter Parker are solved. The pilot really shines in these scenes, and it's this grounding of Peter's character that separates it from many other Spider-Man series through the years. He's not a bland, one-dimensional character or a overly quirky, two-dimensional one. Instead, he feels like a fully formed character right out of the gate, and that's probably a lot harder to do than it looks. Oh, and this is a pretty minor point, but I really like how Aunt May is really uptight in this show. We've had a lot of incarnations of her in the past, and most of them lately are either cool aunt or total saint. It's nice to see a show that remembers that her original characterization was a little more complicated than that. She was constantly anxious, prying into Peter's social life, and just generally worrying about her young nephew all the time. This show uses that really well, and places a lot of importance on Peter's curfews and how he has to battle Electro or the Lizard and still make it home by 10, which I love because that's a quintessentially Spider-Man problem. Like, you can't really see Tony Stark putting up with those issues. But the show goes out of its way to make sure that you don't roll your eyes at Aunt May's worries either. After all, this is a woman who lost her husband to a carjacker like 3 months ago. It makes sense that she wouldn't be totally cool with her teenage nephew just mysteriously leaving all the time.
Leopoldo, Ford Bika!
But anyway, let's look at the bigger picture a little bit, and most importantly, those essentials that I mentioned earlier. Spectacular Spider-Man, especially the first season, is structured pretty perfectly. Sure, there's some problems here and there, like Max Dillon's arc from being a nice maintenance dude to a supervillain over the course of 22 minutes was a bit much for one episode, but for the most part, it's a surprisingly patient show that sets up its characters' arcs thoughtfully and meticulously, giving Spidey's villains a lot more depth than they usually get on the small screen. And this smart world building has a lot of other great advantages. Like, look, I love comic books. They're the medium that all these great characters and even this genre came from. But I don't think there's many out there that would deny that comic universe continuity can get a bit messy. And Spider-Man is definitely no exception, as the character has passed through the hands of countless writers and artists through the years. And a lot of those stories have completely different tones. It's hard to imagine the old Lee and Ditko stuff existing in the same timeline as like Kraven's Last Hunt, but we just kind of do. Spectacular does a great job of taking all those disparate tones and characters and making a more streamlined version of the Webhead's world. Now, Eddie Brock may be the best example of this. No offense to any Venom fans out there, but he's a character that just screams late 80s, early 90s. And that can present a problem when you've established a show very rooted in the 60s high school tone, with early villains like the Green Goblin and Doc Ock. This was actually a problem that Spider-Man 3 ran into. But the show is able to build Brock into the story from the very beginning, Both kind of a laid-back jock and a biology student, Eddie has probably never been more likable on screen than he is here. So when he falls, it actually hits pretty hard. Unlike most adaptations of the character, where he just comes off as this like jealous moron who overreacts to everything, in Spectacular, Eddie's reasons to hate and turn against Peter make a lot of sense from his perspective.
Pretend you're Spider-Man. Your mission, to rescue your friend high above. A job for your Spider-Man web shooter. Flip.
And he's not the only character the show does great stuff with, like Harry and Norman Osborn. One of the many subplots that this show follows in its early episodes is Norman's extreme expectations for Harry. And even when Harry manages to live up to them, making the football team, getting good grades, whatever, Norman goes out of his way to make sure Harry knows that it isn't enough.
Quite an opportunity. Don't suppose you were considered for the honor, Harry?
Which the show then smartly blends with the classic Harry has a drug problem arc. I mean, it's a potion or something because this is a cartoon, but still, it's really impressive how they managed to take all of this Spider-Man history and condense it into something that makes perfect sense for the characters. The whole gang is here too. Gwen Stacy, Mary Jane, J. Jonah Jameson, Flash Thompson. Mary Jane is very comics accurate here, much more than the version in the Raimi movies ever was actually. But Gwen, well, here's the thing about Gwen. There's a reason before a few years ago, the only notable thing she ever really did in the comics was die, because back before Spider-Gwen, she was pretty boring. So the show took what the Ultimate Comics did with MJ, making her Peter's kind of nerdy buddy, and applied it to Gwen instead, and it works pretty well. The only one I have much of a problem with is Flash, honestly. He just seems like he's in a much goofier show than everyone else. Like, yeah, I know it's literally a Saturday morning cartoon, but compared to the rest of the cast, he's just a lot less developed. Though he does become a little less over the top as the show goes on. Overall, Spectacular is pretty much the ideal Spider-Man cartoon. And it will always be pretty sad that some stupid behind-the-scenes rights issues prevented the show from ever finishing its story. Honestly, it's up there with Firefly and Deadwood for shows that'll never quite get over getting cancelled too soon. But at the end of the day, I'm just thankful that we have 2 seasons of what might be the best Peter Parker and Spider-Man ever put on screen. Hey guys, no weird old-timey commercial this time around. Instead, I wanted to talk to you about my brand new Patreon page. When I started this channel almost a year ago, I never expected it to take off like it has. And seriously, thank you all for watching. It's been amazing, honestly. One thing you probably don't know about me though is that I'm also a full-time college student, and that can make things a little tough for the channel. To be honest, I started my channel at a really weird time to become a YouTuber. 2017 saw the adpocalypse, a lot of wrongful demonetization of videos that are determined to be not suitable for advertisers for no reason, which has hit this channel in particular pretty hard. A lot of my videos are unable to earn any ad revenue when they're posted, or even wrongful copyright strikes, like the ones I keep receiving from the company that puts out the Iron Man Blu-rays in Germany, who apparently have never heard of fair use. There's even some videos now where they make 100% of the revenue off of your views, and I don't see any of it. Now, believe me, I'm not in this to become a YouTube millionaire or something, but it's kind of gotten to the point where I either need to start earning more through sponsorships and Patreon, or I need to get another part-time job, which would probably mean I couldn't afford to focus on the channel as much. And honestly, that's the exact opposite of what I want to do. I would much rather be producing more content for you guys, not less. And with your help, I think that's possible. But I know that if I'm going to ask for your hard-earned money, I should give you something worth it in return. That's why I've decided to make monthly Patreon-exclusive videos. For $5 a month, you'll gain access to even more content, as each month I post another full-length additional Captain Midnight video that will be exclusive to my patrons. The first one, where I dig even farther into Spectacular Spider-Man and name my favorite episodes of the first season, is already up, and you can watch it right now if you decide to donate. Now, to be clear, the regular weekly Captain Midnight videos will of course remain completely free, 4 videos a month, just like always. This is just something you could do if you want even more videos and, you know, want to help me out a little bit. As proud as I am of the videos I've made, I kind of view them as just the beginning. Eventually, I really want to expand the scope of the channel to include even longer, more in-depth video essays, and your donations would give the channel the tools to do that. So yeah, if that sounds good to you, you can sign up at the $5 level and get the Patreon exclusive video, with another one getting added every single month. Or you could pick another level that works for you. There's some pretty cool additional perks being offered too if you want to check those out. So head over to patreon.com/CaptainMidnight by clicking the link in the description or in the pinned comment down below, and I will see you next week.